So this is more of a doing things you don't want to do, and it's a store owner thing rather than a player thing or a hobbyist thing or a gamer thing. There are things that you got to do when you run a business that you probably a lot of them you didn't know you'd have to do, and it is what it is. And others are you actively didn't want to do when you thought about opening the store, and even afterwards you didn't want to do, and you still have to do it. And the best example I have, and I've talked about this before, is card singles. I didn't originally want to sell singles in Magic or any of the card games. Um, Now, when I first talked about opening my store, or when I had just basically started painting the store, at some point, there was a guy I worked with in North Bay that he was a pro Magic player, and he's like, "Yeah, you gotta be selling singles. That's the most important thing because your players need singles, and that's his focus because he's a pro player and he needs his singles, and he doesn't necessarily. He did buy boxes, but obviously." He's playing. I think it was mostly standard that he was playing, but he needs his singles, and the players need their singles. And I just didn't really want to deal with singles because it seemed like a huge hassle to me, and I'm not a big singles buyer. I like cracking packs, and I thought that you could get by on just selling boxes, and maybe you can, but it's really helpful to sell singles. And then, but more importantly to me, when my nephew decided that he wanted to sell singles, was one, he wanted to do it. But then when I saw what was happening with the people that came and shopped in my store, was that they were glad to get singles and to have a place to also be able to sell their stuff back to it. It just I don't know. I like the fact that they enjoyed the experience more so than necessarily buying a box of things. They didn't necessarily enjoy the experience more than once they started cracking packs, but it was important to me that that I was I was providing a valuable service, and that's what this guy was expressing, is that service is a valuable service that's almost required when you're running a card store. Now, if you're running a store that happens to sell cards, but it's some other store, like it's a comic book shop, or it's a cafe, or it's I don't know, some other genre adjacent thing where you're not providing a space for people to play, and you just happen to have some product that is collectible card games, you don't have to sell singles. But I think that he's right, and my nephew's right, that when you're having the type of game store where it's focused mainly on collectible card games, then you kind of have to get into the singles game, if only to keep your regular customers happy. Um, it's just kind of you're providing a service, and that's part of the service that you're providing as an expectation from them. But I think maybe it should be an expectation from yourself. And I wanted to mostly be a board game store because that's what I like the most, and I like Dungeons and Dragons the most. But unfortunately, I don't think that's something that you can do as just like if you opened a store that you were only selling board games and maybe Dungeons and Dragons. I don't think you'd survive without card games. So I don't know. Uh, you kind of gotta sell collectible card games too, or something else, or be a coffee store that happens to sell games as well, or something like that. But you can't survive on just board games at this point in time. The market might change on those. I don't know what the market is like for board games because there's nobody making a marketing or a market watch board game channel like they are with Magic the Gathering or other card games. A lot of people talk about the market in collectible card games. Almost nobody talks about the market in board games. I'd like to see more of that content, and maybe I should be making more of that content, so maybe I will, but there's not a lot to talk about. People come in, they'll buy they might buy a board game, and around Christmas they'll buy more board games, but there's not the same level of excitement and energy as when people come in to buy collectible card games. and the velocity of sales is way less. But I'll think about a way of expressing the the movement of board games in a future video. But let me know below if that's something you want to see. Um, Other than that, I just wanted to talk about things that you might have to do that you didn't think you'd have to do or you didn't want to do, but you're going to have to do them because you're running a business, and unless you want the business to fail, then you're going to have to do things that maybe run counter to the way you thought. Like basically the business, you'll conceptualize it before you do it, and then it'll be a completely different thing by the time you get around to doing it, unless you don't let it be a completely different thing because you're stubborn about it, and then I don't know, it'll probably fail. So you got to remain open and agile, and you got to be able to transform your thinking into what is best for the business and what is going to move product and therefore generate revenue and bring in new product so that people have a variety of new and old things to choose from. Otherwise, your store will probably stagnate unless you've got a location that is high density and there's very little competition around. Maybe you can make it work, but I don't think so. So just keep in mind that if you're thinking of starting a business and it's a gaming business, that the thing that you're thinking about now, it may not be that thing when you get to that point. And you may have to do things that you didn't want to do. And I'm not talking about in like I don't know, you're an assassin for hire or something like that, or you're cooking the books or whatever. I'm talking about you're selling product you didn't think you wanted to sell because you didn't particularly like it, or you're bringing in product, or you're dealing with customers you didn't think you were ever going to have to deal with, and it just is what it is, and you've got to maneuver around. It is what it is, and that's it. Let me know what you think in the comments below.